Evening, everybody. Welcome to the Photographer Academy. I'm Mark Cleghorn, and that guy's Karl. How are you, Karl?
Hi, I'm good, thank you. Thanks for having me.
We've been gossiping before we got going for about 20 minutes, haven't we, kind of thing, you know?
Yes, yeah.
Sorry about that. I do talk a bit.
Yeah.
You noticed that, have you?
Yeah.
Sorry. Karl, because it's the first time we've kind of had you on the Photographer Academy, could you just kind of let us know a little bit about you, how you got going in photography, how you're kind of managing today and everything else, please, if that's okay?
Sure, yeah. It's such a long story how I got into photography. It could take a whole hour, but I'll give you the briefest version possible. So I've always had a really creative side, and I went to art college, and in my early 20s I was pretty good at painting, drawing, that kind of thing. But growing up where I did in Hull, there wasn't really many opportunities in the creative world, so I went into a kind of a regular job I say regular job compared to us photographers, as a draftsman in engineering, and I stayed in that job for around 20 years. But I've always had this love of the outdoors. So during my 20s and 30s, I spent my spare time cycling and doing kind of extreme sports. That was my nature fix. And I completely kind of neglected my creative side. But when I got into my mid-30s, I'm trying to keep this story short as I can. I had a few health problems, so I couldn't do the kind of sports I was doing to the same level. And I also decided that I wasn't very happy working in an office. So I embarked on a degree in conservation. And obviously this got me out and about into various habitats. And as I was exploring these habitats, I bought myself a DSLR camera. And I found that I really enjoyed taking photographs of the various landscapes we were visiting and this kind of thing. And it turned out that my photos were pretty good. People saying, you know, these are really good. So it reignited that creative side that I'd neglected for so long. And this was probably around 2011, but by 2013 I was beginning to take it really seriously, and I had a lot of attention quite quickly from various manufacturers, and by 2016 I was able to turn professional. So kind of all these paths in my life led to this moment, and it feels like this is what I'm meant to be doing. I finally found what I'm meant to be doing. And so yeah, that was the short version.
So as a landscape photographer, it's a really difficult thing to actually make money from, isn't it? And things, really, you know. I've seen some great friends of mine over the years scratching their heads, actually knowing how they can make a real living from landscape photography. Is it tougher than ever before?
It really is. I mean, as we discussed earlier, during lockdown, I almost considered going back to a regular job. But thankfully, things have picked up again. I have some really good opportunities in the last 18 months, 2 years, after a very quiet period. So I built up this kind of momentum. I had various ambassadorships from 2016 up until 2020, and then everything just went downhill like it did for many of us, you know, COVID, the pandemic. But thankfully, things are picking up again, and everything's looking really positive. And it's good. You've got to be diverse. You've got to do as much as you can. And so things like this, it's really good to be here tonight talking with you.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, should we get going with an image? Is that okay? I know that your one of your partners is Hahnemuhle, like ours, and things, really. So feel free to actually talk about products and everything else with it. I'm absolutely a massive fan of some of their products as well with it. So I'll name drop a few if that's okay during my session. But if I'm wrong, and you prefer something else, then you're the master tonight and things, really. Okay, so let's get on. So we've got a first image then, which is what I referred to as rocks on a lake, or whatever you want to do and things, really. Talk us through it.
No, couldn't be further from the actual scene. So one of the things, choosing 8 images is always a bit of a dilemma, because as a photographer you're thinking, well, shall I go with what I know are the really popular and pretty landscape images, Or shall I go with the ones that really mean something and have a bit of a narrative? So of course I chose the latter. And this is one of my personal favourite landscape images actually, and it's actually Wastwater in the Lake District. So it's at lakeside, not a beach, Mark. So there you go. And I developed this kind of style rather quickly, which I refer to as a visual mantra. And that's kind of my whole ethos. So to talk you through that a little bit, it's not quite minimalism, it's the simplification of a scene. So we're stripping it back to the crucial elements. And firstly, these rocks just leapt out at me. I mean, they're so bold and geometric. And also mystery is important. So what you can't see in this image, in actual fact, the Scafell Pike behind the clouds. That's the highest mountain in England. But the narrative here was that in some ways the mountain are visible to us in these rocks because they would have once been a part of the landscape. So I'm trying to project that kind of cyclical nature of the landscape. Now that's not something you would necessarily know looking at it without me telling you, but that's my thought processes for this image. So I'm aiming for mystery and a kind of just a simplification of the scene, which makes it a bit more intimate than a kind of sprawling landscape, if you know what I mean. I mean, people start with wide angle lenses and you get like this huge skies and you cram as much in it as possible. But for me, you really need to get something into the foreground to give it some kind of impact, you know?
Good. Question coming through already.
Right.
Can you talk through a little bit about the equipment? So they've asked what camera and lens do you use for this kind of image?
I can. So for a long time, I was a Sigma ambassador and I'm using one of their little Sigma DP Zeros. So it's a fixed lens fixed to the camera and it's 21 mil, but it's the equivalent of 19, let's say 19 mil in 35 mil. So it's actually a really wide lens. And these rocks, I don't know, they look quite large, don't they? But actually they're only about probably 14 inches. So I was up really close.
Wow.
So that's what I'm saying with wide angle lenses, you do need to get close to use them to the full advantage in landscape. So I'm really close and it's given the scene this kind of impact with the rocks.
Okay. Another question. So if you were constructing an image, how would you start? So what makes a great photograph, I suppose? What makes a great landscape image in your head?
Well, that's the main reason people come on my workshops, actually, because many people are really good technically, but they say my images lack impact or mood. And firstly, the most important thing is you've got to feel at home in the landscape. You've really got to be relaxed, because I get a lot of busy people on the workshops and they just turn up and they're like click, 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 click straight away without really breathing in the scene and taking it in. They just kind of point the camera at it and hope for the best, but you've got to really, it may sound cheesy, but you've got to become connected with that landscape. It's really, really important that you become a part of the atmosphere. So that's first thing to do, is just relax. And then I'll kind of home in, look for kind of interesting foreground material, geometric shapes that lead us in. Obviously, like here, interesting rocks, very geometric. And so it's that I'll increasingly simplify the scene. So I'll take 2 or 3 shots and I end up getting closer and closer until I've got the shot that I want. So it's relaxing and simplifying a scene with just 2 or 3 elements without trying to cram in the entire landscape, which people do that a lot. They try and get as much in as they can, but when they get it on screen or print it out, it's kind of just lost. It's kind of, there's no impact, you know?
Yeah. Another question, if you don't mind. Oh, hang on a minute. I said they'll, once they're on, you know, they'll start questions. So, all right. So feel free to actually say, no, let me talk about the image. Image stacking. Do you shoot just the one image, or do you image stack?
I'm very much a purist, or maybe I'm just a bit simple, because I like to keep things simple. So here, my processing is very minimal. It's a single shot, but I do use filters. I use Lee filters, so I've got a 0.6 grad down to the horizon. So a 0.6 grad, that's a 2-stop, and it's a hard grad, so that'll be sitting on basically the bottom of that mountain where the lake is. So no, I like to get things right in camera with just one shot. I've never produced a composite, or not one that I've shared. I've played around with it like we all do, but yeah, I'm very much a purist in that respect.
Cool. I'll stop the questions for a minute. Go, it's yours.
Well, for that image, that's just about it really. So the filters, very minimal processing, and with this, I've probably done a very slight bit of dodging on those rocks to brighten them up a bit, to just lift those rocks, but literally like 5% in the midtones.
And a question about Hahnemuhle straight away and things really. So if you're printing this kind of image out, what's your first choice? Like I mentioned, I use a few of their papers anyway. I'm absolutely in love with William Turner, no matter what. I mean, that's a favorite of mine and things really. But what kind of things do you use as a rule?
There are so many in the range that I've not tried the William Turner, so I'll have to get them to send me some. Okay. Thank you. But I've actually got a print of that here, and for this type of image, I've used Barita, fine art Barita.
Okay.
If you can see,
yep,
it looks pretty much like we've got on screen, even this low light, doesn't it? So
it does, yeah.
Yeah, and I use this for most of my color images, and it has a really good kind of contrast. It's good for really detailed images, and the contrast is really strong. The detail is phenomenal. You don't lose any detail whatsoever in the shadows. Even where it's really dark here, you can see even into the water. It's fantastic. So yes, Barita is my favorite for color images. And also the Pearl, Fine Art Pearl and Fine Art Barita are my go-to papers for color images.
And what printer are you using at present for your output and things?
Canon Pro 1000. So that's up to A2. Anything bigger than that, I'll get that done somewhere else.
Brilliant. And do you have a certain color space? Sorry, these are the questions coming in. Do you have a preferred color space to work through the printer, or how's your setup?
I work in RGB, and I use the Hahnemuhle ICC profiles.
Yeah.
And obviously, I've got everything kind of calibrated actually by photo speed, where I got the printer from.
Brilliant. Good. Next image, shall we?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Tree in the landscape.
It is. This is a tree that's very local to me, just down the road. And I have my favorite trees. I must say I'm a bit of a tree hugger, by the way. I'm a bit of a hippie, which most landscape photographers are. And this has been a favorite tree for many years. And I could never get a good photograph of it until this mist came in. So I visited countless times. And the reason for that is the tree line on the horizon just beyond it, which you can just see very faintly. That is too harsh. So with this mist that we've got here, it creates this really nice negative space. And we've got a nice kind of frosty foreground. And to discuss kind of the artistic process behind this, I'm hugely influenced by Japanese art, as I mentioned to you earlier. And they have this concept known as ma, which is just MA. And ma is this kind of space where we can just be still. And it doesn't just apply to imagery, it can be a space in conversation. So when we pause, it's really important, particularly in Japanese culture. And even in music, you know, pauses in sound is important. So once you get your head around that concept, it works really well for producing this kind of image, because what we leave out of the scene is just as important as what we put into the scene. So again, I'm really kind of simplifying this. We've got these layers with the kind of really textured foreground. Behind the tree, you can just see the kind of subtle line of the trees. And then obviously the rest is sky. So we've got this kind of layered negative space. And what I referred to earlier with this visual mantra, which is my whole ethos, is that the eye can wander in this negative space and come back to the tree. So it's a real simplification of the scene to give it this kind of impact. And obviously I just really love this tree. It's kind of like a bonsai, isn't it, almost? So it is very Japanese influenced. I take a lot of inspiration from, you know, the kind of really old Japanese paintings. So it's like pen and ink. It's known as sumie. So
say again, yeah. Sorry, say again then. I was looking at the questions.
The old Japanese painting is known as sumie, and that's a really strong influence in my work. So it's kind of this negative space, but also with a touch of mystery, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful, Annie. Okay, a couple of questions. Sorry, I was reading all the questions that you won't believe I'm reading. Saturation looks like you're desaturating images. Is that your style, or is it just the light you're in?
No, for this particular image, see, when I started out, like most landscape photographers, I was chasing the really colourful images. So I was up before dawn looking for amazing sunsets and sunrises. And it wasn't really doing it for me, you know. I take inspiration from many other things like Japanese art and painting, Japanese photography, which is really gritty, you know, and it's not colourful at all. So eventually I look for the scenes that you might not necessarily take, but there is colour there. It's just very subtle, and I've not actually desaturated this at all. It was one of those very grey, kind of flat days, but it's more moody, it's more atmospheric for me than a glorious sunny sunrise, you know.
Question from me for a minute. Do you purposely go to this tree to take the photograph? So you look at the weather and you go, I'm going there, I need to take the photograph? Or is it just like, well, I'm going to take a visit and we'll just see what we get? How does it work in your head?
Well, I go to this place quite often, but on this particular morning, I woke up and I saw frost in the garden, and I thought, that's it, I'm going. Because all landscape photographers love a bit of frost. You know, it kind of transforms a very bland scene into, well, it's just much more atmospheric, basically. It's just much more atmospheric conditions, yeah.
Okay, good. How influential has the particular place? Somebody says they know it well.
Right.
Been to the development of the style, the wood and the heatherland there has featured a lot in your work.
Well, I'm going to plug myself here because this is from a series called Winter Solitude, and we'll see another image from this project later on. So it's a place I know very well, and during lockdown, it was one of the few places I could get to, actually. So I've got a whole series of images from this particular area. So I've been working on a project for probably 3 years, and that's going to feature in Outdoor Photography magazine next month. So I'm pretty chuffed about that, yeah. So it's a very special place, you know.
Yeah, good. So are you a Lightroom user? I'm not sure what that has to do with it. What do you process through, I suppose?
I'm very old school. I've been using Photoshop since year dot, and I had a quick look at Lightroom and I thought, well, I just haven't got time to learn something else. But they're pretty much similar. I have used also, I really like Capture One. I find with Capture One you can get you can achieve a natural look quite quickly, I think. But I couldn't use that for a while because I was using Sigma cameras. They've got a unique processor, sensor, sorry. So I just stuck with Photoshop, but I have intermittently used Capture One, which is pretty awesome, actually.
Okay, good. I think this is a Hahnemuhle question now. How hard is it to calibrate screen to printer?
it's really hard. I find I struggle with it, but I got PhotoSpeed to do it for me with a unique. They send you a unique file, so you send them the model of your monitor, your printer, and your software, and all that kind of thing, and they send you a unique kind of ICC file to calibrate everything. And I should probably update mine, actually. I've not done it for a couple of years, but it seems to work really well. That, and also the Hahnemuhle ICC files are really good. I found they work pretty well.
Brilliant.
But calibration is really important, yeah.
Do you travel light, or do you find that you take too much kit? I think that's to do with tripods and cameras or whatever it would be. I'm interpreting that.
It's one of those dilemmas as landscape photographers that we all face. Back in the day, at one point I was ambassador for about 4 companies, and I felt that I had to take everything with me. And I remember doing a walk in the Shetland Isles in the most northerly point of the UK with the biggest rucksack you've ever seen. It must have weighed half my body weight, and I fell into a peat bog, and my friend had to drag me out. If it wasn't for him, I'd probably still be there now. You know what I mean? So after that trip, it was a real, like, I'm only going to take what I need. And a lot of the time in the last couple of years, I'll just take one camera, one lens for a few of the projects that we'll talk about later. But I do like to keep it minimal. A good all-round lens is nice, something like a 24-105. But also I really prefer primes for prints. Telephoto lenses are really good these days, they're outstanding, but I think that primes do have still the edge, particularly when it comes to the fine detail in printing and just the clarity. It just has something extra, you know. So a favorite lens would probably be the Sigma 40mm art lens. It's outstanding.
Good. Do you sharpen much before printing?
A little. I find that particularly with the Sigma art lens, it's it's eye-wateringly sharp. So I do minimal sharpening as I do with all my processing. So,
okay, cool. When's your next workshop? I love it. I could have wrote that plug myself on that one.
My next one is this weekend, and it's fully booked, I'm pleased to say. But if you visit my website, my winter workshops start again in January. And I have, at present, I've got availability on all of them. So.
Okay, I'll post those links later on, I promise.
Very close to me, Saltwick Bay is a really popular landscape destination. This particular wood, which it's quite funny this, because I advertise this workshop, but I don't tell people where it is until they sign up. I just say it's a Yorkshire Wildlife Trust Reserve in East Yorkshire. But it's sold out. It's sold out in 24 hours, which has never happened before. So people maybe like that mystery aspect of it. But yeah, we're starting again in January.
Okay, great. I will get the links out and we'll see it on screen at the end of things ready. Karl, anything else you want to chat about this image?
No, time's racing on, isn't it?
Yeah, I said the questions would be immense. I do apologize, but we've got an intelligent lot on the Academy, you know. And welcome to everybody who's new as well. There's some really new names on here, so welcome.
Well, I really enjoy the questions, actually, rather than me just waffling on, you know. But anyway, yeah, this again, the first image that we saw was Wastwater in the Lake District, and this is also Wastwater. So it was a really kind of, it was a very rainy day for starters. It was kind of soft rain moving across the lake, very serene, and I really wanted to capture that kind of atmosphere. Obviously, I've used, you okay, Matt?
Yep.
I've used a long exposure here, and that is to create this kind of simplification of the scene. I've really honed in on the crucial elements. So we've got this mountain kind of at 35, 40 degrees in the background, and the fence, it almost mirrors that shape geometrically. So we've got this kind of balance immediately. So it's very geometric with the fence and the mountain. And then something I hadn't even realized until I shot it in long exposure was this line of rocks are like a curve. So this soft curve counterbalances the harsh angles, and it creates just this really zen feeling image that I was trying to portray. And a 30-second exposure here, so that's completely kind of flattened out, smoothed out the water, and it gives us this negative space for the forms to just sit in nicely. Had I not used a long exposure, you'd have obviously all the ripples from the water, and it wouldn't have the same kind of simple kind of minimal effect. It wouldn't have that kind of calmness to it. So the whole point of this was an exercise in evoking that kind of serenity of the lake.
Cool. So would you say you're a black and white photographer or a color photographer at heart?
It depends. Over the last 2 or 3 years, I've really worked on a project by project kind of basis, rather than when I started out as a landscape photographer, it was just about those unique standalone images. So I'll be working on 2 or 3 projects at a time. And yeah, some will be black and white, some will be color. So it really depends, but I'll try and keep a coherent series, a coherent look to any project that I'm working on.
Very good. Sorry, I've lost the train of thought on the questions now. When you start to talk about lines within an image, is this something that is in your head when you start to discuss photographs or at the taking point? I should have just read the question really rather than actually try to surmise the question. You know what they're saying. It's basically, when you see these leading lines and curves, is it natural, instinctive for you, or is it something that you discover more within your images the more you look at them and the more you talk about them?
It's one of those things that's really evolved over time. So I kind of look at everything geometrically. As a photographer, I think you're always on the lookout for a scene. I mean, I'm sharing landscape imagery tonight, but I do all kinds of imagery, street photography, architecture, anything goes. And I think I treat my eyes as if they're the lenses, I'm constantly looking for an image. I must take 20 or 30 snaps a day on my iPhone. Oh, I like the way that line kind of leads into this or that or whatever. But as for this scene, as I said at the beginning, I'll look for a good kind of leading line or interesting kind of foreground material, and I'll eventually just home in on it closer and closer until I think, yes, that's it. It's simplified enough. And people might call this minimalist, but I don't like to use the term minimalism because I'll try and say this. It's difficult to say. I often call it minimalism for minimalism's sake. A lot of people shoot long exposure just for the effect, but it has to have more meaning than that for me. It's more a simplification of the scene. So I don't call this minimalism. It's sticking to my whole ethos that I teach, which I refer to as a visual mantra. So it's just leading the eye around in a pleasing way, having the negative space for the eye to relax in, but also having just the crucial elements for the eye to wander in between, if that makes any sense.
No, it does. Question, is there much money in fine art print sales?
I wish there was more.
Yeah, everybody on the planet does, I think, yeah.
Even for myself, it's good to be in galleries, and at the moment I'm not in any galleries. I have been in the past, so next year I'll be really looking at getting into more galleries because, yeah, I do sell through my website, but it's really difficult to plug an image or a print, sorry, because even viewing it online, you just can't get the quality across, it's impossible. And this image in particular, which I've just remembered, I have printed out. So here, and this is printed on agave paper, so it's Hahnemühle's natural line. And I'm using this at present for all of my black and white imagery. And it has a really it's a matte paper. I don't know if you can see that.
I can see it doesn't shine at all, yeah.
Almost a kind of warm tone to it, so it really suits black and white, but there's no loss of detail despite it being matte. and kind of with this warmness to it. The detail's still there. It's phenomenal, and it just gives everything kind of really a softer look than the burrito, which is good for the really contrasty, detailed images. But because this is kind of has a soft feel and atmosphere to it, it just really suits it.
Mm.
So I've digressed slightly there, but the question was prints. Yes, you just can't get the quality across online, so it's good to get into galleries, that kind of thing.
Good. Okay. Somebody's getting in trouble with long exposures, looking at buying a new tripod. Any advice for landscapes specifically, I gather?
Yes, I'm going to sound completely biased because I am a Benro ambassador, but the Benro tripods are absolutely fantastic. The Mac 3s is my main tripod. That's a fairly sturdy tripod, but they also do kind of lighter travel tripods, but they're all really rigid, really, really good tripods. And I'm not just saying that because I've used a lot of tripods over the years, and also the Mac 3s. If you're going to do something like seascape photography, they have a kind of twist lock, and they're really easy to service and clean. So I'd really, really recommend looking at the Benro tripods. Okay, they're cool. As good as another brand which might not be named, much more expensive. They're just as good.
Okay, you mean Manfrotto?
No, another one.
Oh, okay.
I used to do a bit of work for Manfrotto as well, but I switched after a couple of years.
We'll leave it there. How deliberately do you plan projects, or do you just evolve from one or two initial images or ideas? Well done, Tim. Good question. I didn't mean the others were bad. Okay, no. Before I get trouble here. Well done, Tim. I like that one.
I like exploring remote landscapes. So before lockdown, I spent probably as much time in the Highlands and Islands of Scotland as I did at home. I'll just simply go for a wander and really try to connect with a place, and I'll find that the images come to me. As I mentioned at the beginning, you've really got to relax and get to know the landscape to feel at home in it, and eventually the images will come. So cool. Yeah, very organic process for me. Yeah.
Good. There's another image, black and white. There's a few black and whites together. There was a question come through about printing. Does your printer just print in black, or is it a cumulative color?
It does have a cumulative color, but it has a setting which I use for black and white. It's simply black and white.
Okay, thanks. I just thought I'd get that in because I knew there was a couple of shots.
You can print in the color mode, if you know what I mean, in black and white, but I just press the black and white selection and that works. Yeah.
Brilliant. Next image then.
This is a very famous tree. There are a lot of well-known trees in landscape photography circles, and it's on the Isle of Skye on a mountain range called the Kerrang, pronounced as in the heavy metal magazine Kerrang. And this tree also, if you've got Amazon and you know the default slideshow, there's a scene of the Kerrang, and you can just see this little tree poking out of a cliff edge. And as I said, it's very well known, and most photographers will photograph this kind of looking down on it, so the tree is kind of lost against the background. But I really wanted to simplify the scene, and to do this I took a bit of a risk. Basically, I climbed down a cliff edge to separate the tree from the kind of landscape behind. So I was hanging off this cliff edge with my arm at full extension, with my camera in my hand, no tripod, literally reaching out like this. I took the shot, and I didn't expect it to come out as it did. Everything is pin sharp from back to front, handheld. So with this image, and every image, if it's a kind of iconic location that's well photographed, I'll always try to get a unique angle on it. And I've not seen many other pictures from this angle because, well, you've got to be a bit, well, unhinged to get into this position, I imagine. It's fairly tricky. I was literally hanging off a cliff edge, but it's one of the images that I've chosen tonight are some of my personal favorites because they've got these stories behind them, but also I like them as standalone images as well. So yeah.
I mean, that's the great thing about the F8. We don't have to keep to a theme. It's just favorite images of what you want to talk about with us. So it's a nice way to do things. There's quite a few questions coming through. We'll just go through another image though. This shot.
Okay, so this is a project of mine called Forest Visions, and it's a deeply personal project. You know, I'm a thoroughly modern chap, so I don't mind talking about my emotions. And this particular series, at the time, I was going through a pretty hard time in my own life, and I was struggling with kind of anxiety and all that kind of thing, and I was literally having almost like a breakdown. This was taken in a forest, and I had like a anxiety attack. And to get out of this, I just started taking images, clicking away, and I had literally a vision of the forest. And that's why it's called Forest Visions, because I knew how I wanted the images to look. And I always say to people that if you can portray your emotions through imagery, they're going to have, or the possibility that they're going to resonate with other people. So, for example, I entered this into Black and White Photographer of the Year, this series, and it was shortlisted, and I was absolutely blown away. And this was kind of like a turning point, and I thought, I started out with these standalone pretty landscape images, and that was just to please other people. But this kind of more personal project, it's really kind of evoking the emotions that I was feeling. It's an outlet, you know, art can be an outlet, and it's obviously used as a therapy. And it was a real turning point, like I say. So although it's very personal, it was also quite successful in that it was picked up and being published. So yeah, it gave me the confidence to explore the use of emotion in my photography, and that's still really important to this day. So yeah, a bit of it's definitely a dark series because it came from a dark place, you know. But
funny enough, I don't see it as dark. I definitely can see the empathy and I can see the emotion in it. And it's really good that you talk about, I think there's too much talk about, you know, how do I say it without getting slaughtered online? There's too much about, you know, the world is nigh and, you know, I'm feeling down and kind of thing. But there is true emotion in taking photographs that you can let things out. You can go for a walk and take images, you know, that's the power. Well, don't please others. You said it. And don't try and please others. Please yourself. And don't be afraid of taking a bad photograph.
Well, I always say to someone, the only validation you'll ever need is the fact that you were put yourself in action to take that photograph. That's the only validation you need. And you've got to, if you want to become successful or develop your own voice and aesthetic, you've got to shoot from the heart, you know.
I'm with you, honestly. Again, don't try and please others. Do what, you know. Photography is photography. You know, you don't have to show everybody your photographs, do you? You know, we take them for ourselves, and then we almost want to celebrate it to show others. I'm on about even in the darkroom, going back to night school days. You know, it's kind of everybody would be around the dish waiting for it to appear. And then it was either going to be a disappointment or an ecstatic, you know, kind of buzzing around. And it is a passion. It's really good for you to talk about that, you know, because that really is, photographers have something at their fingertips that they can go for a walk and take photographs. And I love it that the community of photography is really, really strong and powerful for each other as well with things, really. But yeah, cool. Speaking about depressiveness, I absolutely love this location. All right. But before we go on, how do you go about selecting a paper for a particular image? Natural instinct, experience, or trial and error?
Because I've kind of over the years had my favorites, as I've already discussed, the Burrito I use and the Pearl for the more detailed images and the color images. I know that I'll pretty much use those tried and tested papers. And as I've mentioned earlier, the previous print that I showed on the agave paper, I'm using that for my black and white. And this particular image that's on screen now, I know that that's also going to look really good in the natural line papers, which have this kind of softness to them. So I have my favorites basically, so I'll probably know before I start printing. But then additionally, sometimes you'll experiment, and I've actually, just a sec. The previous image that we were looking at, the Forest Visions, this is printed on metallic paper. And now metallic paper it's so good. It's got it's very contrasty, but it kind of shimmers.
Yeah, you can see it.
See, and it really, that also works beautiful for black and white. I personally, I've not done any color printing with it, but for the black and white, it's really nice. So this previously was on agave, but this was a bit of an experiment yesterday, and I really like it. Yeah. So this is kind of a special edition metallic print.
Okay, stay on that for a minute if you can. A couple of questions on Hahnemuhle. Somebody, they're doing a club night where they're doing printing, and they're looking at actually art papers. What's your kind of go-to advice for where to start, so they're going to get, you know, decent results? I know that's a really hard question, I suppose, but what's the one you'd recommend that somebody goes for color and somebody goes for black and white?
You mean like a good all-rounder?
Yeah.
I like the pearl, the fine art pearl, for color and black and white. Yeah, I can't fault it. It's just great results. Whatever the kind of image, whether it's vivid color, black and white, detailed, or kind of more blurry, abstract, it just works really well for everything. Actually, if I was to choose just one, if that's kind of what the question means.
Yeah.
But also, obviously, I've already mentioned my favorites: agave from the natural line, Barita, and yeah, pearl is a great all-rounder. And the metallic, but that's very specific. Actually, only works for. It's a very specific look, so I wouldn't recommend that for everything.
Cool. Best place to be buying Hahnemuhle at present? The paper. Have you got anywhere that you recommend?
Hahnemuhle website.
Say again, sorry.
Hahnemuhle website.
Straight from them, is it? Yeah.
I do have a discount code.
Oh, okay. Get that at the end. Let's not forget that.
You can find on my website. Yeah.
Oh, we'll show the website in a minute. You can point it to us and things really. Right. Let's go to the next image, and then we'll come back with some more questions. Yeah. I love this shot. Go.
Good. So this is on the Isle of Skye, and a place called Staffin, which is on the coast. And this house, so it looks out over the coast to the Hebrides. Absolutely stunning view, looking out from this, well, ex-house. And obviously, I was driving past here, and it caught my eye. I mean, the weathered tree. It was a really moody, dark day, and this is a handheld shot. And it's really, all of the images that I've shared tonight are really special for me, really special moments. And so I was taking this photograph. It was insanely windy. And as I took it, these starlings flew into the scene and positioned themselves perfectly between the apex of the house. And I just did this kind of fist pump, you know. I thought, that's it. This is what it's all about. And previous to this project, which is from a project called Where Ravens Soar, which I've had published a few places. Prior to this, I was doing the kind of really technical landscape imagery. And by technical, I mean the use of tripods, filters. It's all very, well, technical, basically. But I'd spent so much time in the Highlands in bad weather, just horrific conditions, that you couldn't use filters, and even sometimes a tripod, it was just impossible. So I'd taken to driving and hiking around with just one camera and one lens. And this eventually developed into an aesthetic for the entire project. So as I was discussing earlier, a project will develop over time, and it's generally down to the conditions that I'm shooting in. So there's an entire series of this. And yeah, it's just a really, really beautiful, fleeting moment for me. And it's one of my personal favorites too. I'm glad you like it.
Yeah, I love it. Somebody's in a wheelchair and they're looking to start to move more and more into landscape photography. Any advice for them?
Oh,
That's a hard one, that, isn't it?
because a lot of the places I go are very, very rugged. I guess thinking about it, nature reserves, kind of the wildlife trusts, and particularly the RSPB, they have some stunning locations. I mean, close to me is a place called Bempton Cliffs, and it's absolutely stunning, and wheelchair access is great there. So rather than, obviously you can't head out into the wild, up mountains and all this kind of thing, but nature reserves have often really good access. So I kind of Google RSPB in particular. They have some stunning locations all around the country, you know, everywhere basically, and they're really good at accommodating wheelchair users. So yeah, that would be a good place to start, I think.
I don't think we've had a question about disability access before, so very well done on that news, really. Okay, do you see an image like this in black and white at the time, or would you process in color as well?
It depends. If I'm already well into a project and I kind of know what I'm after, but if I'm heading out somewhere new or it doesn't tie in with any of my current projects, I don't always know, but generally I will, if you know what I mean. So yeah, I knew this was going to be black and white. Yeah, it's on a project by project basis, really.
Have you used your smartphone much for landscape photography?
Yes, I have. Yeah. Although I've not kind of published anything, there's nothing on my website, but I have many photographs from my iPhone that I really like. Yeah, sometimes it's the light in the sky in the Hebrides is so fleeting that sometimes you don't have time to get your camera out. So if you're just driving through, the smartphone's really convenient. But I wouldn't rule out a smartphone-based workshop or even a project in the future. That it's amazing what you can do with them. And I do always say to people, if they're coming in a workshop, they say often, do I need a DSLR? You know, what kit do I need? I said, for me, you can literally come on the workshop with a smartphone, because it's all about, I'm teaching really compositional skills, although obviously we can cover the technical side as well. But I found that my workshops are really people that are already at a certain level technically and they just want some help with composition, that kind of thing.
Okay. I think they're referring to this image. My skies are usually too white. How do I get the grayness? And I think they're referring to this kind of image. We've seen it before in a few of the kind of lock images as well, didn't we?
Yeah, I think so. For my digital photography, I use Silver FX Pro for black and white. But I mean, it really doesn't matter, I guess, which kind of software you use. But cameras these days, the dynamic range is so good that you can, unless you're really overexposing, you can get detail back in almost any sky, I think. So I like to keep it as natural as I can. I mean, some people may be tempted to really increase the structure in this sky and knock back the highlights too much, which that creates a really kind of, I don't know, a false image. I like to keep things natural. But as for the question, I think you need to use some form of post-processing to take the highlights out of your sky. It depends on the process. I mean, you can also use filters like I use Lee filters, grads and that kind of thing. It depends on the scene. Of course, they always say expose for the highlights.
Yeah. Format and cropping.
Oh yeah.
Do you usually keep to camera crop or do you post crop?
No, I don't. I never use native, the 3:2 ratio. I never use it. It's too wide for me, because I mean, I started out using the native format, but over time I found it was too expansive. I like to kind of produce a more intimate scene. So for me, most of these images are 4:3 ratio, which you can set up in most cameras now, actually.
Something's come through. Can you do the photo critiques, please? Because Mark always talks panoramic.
Really?
Thanks, Jim.
Well, I do like panoramic images too, you know, but for my kind of style, I've just adopted this kind of more it's more intimate, really. Maybe it's me, mate. I just struggle to fill that.
He's teasing me. No, he's teasing me because of everything that I say about his images. Anyway, cool. Frosty color, woodland.
Yes, this is another from the local woodland, and my project, which I've called Winter Solitude, and it's all about the kind of finding peace in the woods in winter, because you go into a woodland in this country in winter, it's generally drab, grey and lifeless, but just a touch of frost transforms the entire scene, and it makes it really into a magical kind of winter woodland. And I don't normally feature the sun in my images these days at all. I find it too distracting, but here it's been kind of diffused by the early morning mist, and for me it kind of provides a really meditative spot. That's kind of one of the kind of aspects of my visual mantra, is I want my images to be kind of meditative, so you can sit with the print and just enjoy it. So your eye is drawn to the sun, but then you've got the angles of these trees, which are, you know, being carefully positioned to lead the eye around in kind of a pleasing way. So you're led around by the geometry, but you've also got this warming glow of the sun. And this, again, this is going to be featured in Outdoor Photography magazine next month, so as part of the Winter Solitude project.
Brilliant. Color and printing, I think we'll go back to, I think, the profiles again.
Oh yeah.
Help. That's all it says.
Yeah.
Color and printing help.
So I start for starters, you've got to have your monitor calibrated. You can buy calibration devices and use, as I mentioned, PhotoSpeed can provide a kind of calibration support for your particular kit. But the best starting place would be the paper print profiles as well. It's a really good place to start. I mean, you could talk about printing all night. It's quite a dark art actually, and there's a lot of trial and error involved. So, and I'm no expert. I use what works for me, and I'm self-taught. So there are probably many other methods, but a good place to start would be perhaps PhotoSpeed, but also use the printer profiles, paper profiles.
I'd definitely go to the likes of Hahnemuhle or whatever paper that you use, download
Yes.
their profiles first. If you
Really?
find that you're having a little bit of an issue to do with color balance or whatever, just do a test strip and create, so reset your colors in Photoshop.
Good point.
So, you know, D for default, remember, is that reset for black and white. Then draw yourself across an image that has a variety of whatever you're trying to print, and just basically create a small strip of a graduation across the image, and then you'll see the kind of the depth of black and where the white goes to. And if you do something like that, especially if you find color issues, because you're only theoretically printing black and white onto a patch of your photograph, you should see the issues where it starts to either have a contamination, because remember, even though you calibrate your monitor, if your monitor is badly calibrated in the same way, you're basically not going to get out what you see, kind of thing with it. So just because it looks good on screen doesn't mean you're going to get out. So anybody who's kind of confused with what we're saying about ICC profiles and color management and all that kind of thing, if you're in doubt, draw yourself a quick box on a photograph and basically put a black and white gradient within it and print it, and you should see any issues to do with color. And once you know that, then you can kind of almost kind of get into your technique of doing a test print before you're actually doing anything, because it takes a while, Carl, isn't it, really, to really produce that print you go, oh my god, that's it, nailed.
That's the great point, Mark, about the test strip. I always do a test strip. I forgot to mention that. So yeah, but yeah, you're right, it can take 2 or 3 attempts. Sometimes it's taken me a lot more if I'm honest. Yeah. until as you write, it finally goes ping. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you pray to God you're not going to run out of ink or change. We've got a question about batches of paper. So
Mm.
do the different batches change in their printability? Can you remind me about that in a minute? But you know, in the good old days of color printing and black and white printing and so on, you had problems with batches of paper as they change. You'd have to reset up the color calibration. So
Mm.
this isn't new. You know, you're used to it. You're not used to it, as it were, if you're just getting printing for yourself. But don't fear the bad print again. Just fear using a lot of ink up. So kind of just print a specific part of the image as far as the test instead of doing the whole thing with it. Batches, do you know anything about the difference in the color batches with Hahnemuhle?
I've never noticed anything
No, I
personally.
haven't. No, it's a
No.
good sign anyway. Sorry about that. Good questions. How much has your thinking been affected by your recent trip to Japan?
Well, it was transformational actually, Japan, on a personal level, because some of my followers on social media might know that like it was like my dream destination, and my work is always has been very heavily influenced by Japanese art and culture. And the whole experience was really, I struggle to put it into words. It was spiritual. For a start, the people are just, they're magical. There's so much respect for every other individual. So it's just a really nice place to be. And obviously my work really resonates with the Japanese audience because I was invited over there. So that was really special for me. But actually it hasn't changed the way I feel about my work because it's always had that influence. But on a personal level, I feel I don't know what to say. It was just a very spiritual place to be. Yeah,
Very good.
it was amazing.
I think everybody's jealous about your trip to Japan anyway, and good news that you're going back again. And I hope it's in
Yeah.
time for the blossom.
No, it's winter.
Oh,
No, but it's my dream come true because I'm going to Hokkaido, which is like it's basically like the Arctic. The sea freezes, so it's going to be epic for photography, landscape photography.
very good.
But anyway, the last image, isn't it?
The
So
last image, yeah.
this image was shot on film during lockdown. Obviously, we couldn't travel very far. This was relatively close, and it's Saltwick Bay in North Yorkshire, which I'm actually running a workshop here in, I forget, early next year. Check my website. But during lockdown, I trekked myself to a medium format analog camera, a Bronica RF645, just for something different, to keep the creative juices flowing. And I found that I really love the look, and it's just really kind of, I like the grain. It's really moody, it just has obviously a different feel to digital. There's no doubt about it. It's different look. You'll know, you've been a photographer for many years. But back to this image, people visit here and they want that kind of glorious, colourful sunrise. And when I arrived, I was gutted because it was bright blue sky. I was like, oh no, this is the worst thing for landscape photography. There's no mood at all. But the sea mist came in, and I had this new camera with me. And I thought, this is awesome. This is exactly what I want. So again, this is from a new project, which is simply a working title of North Sea, but they're all very moody, grey images, grey skies, that kind of thing. So completely moving away from the kind of more traditional, colourful landscape photography. Basically moody seascapes.
Brilliant. Are you scanning and printing yourself then, or are you printing out?
I'm using a lab at the moment. I'm currently looking into scanning myself, but you're going to have to spend a lot of money to get a scanner that's as good as a lab. I was looking at spending maybe £1,000, but even that, it's not going to be as good as the professional labs. You're going to need to spend at least £2,500. So for now, I'm just going to continue using the lab.
Yeah.
But having said that, I do print them myself, so I get them scanned in. I'll work on them in Photoshop, and then I do my own prints. So it works really well, actually.
Yeah, most labs, I'm not sure what you're paying. I mean, the most I've ever seen is about 20 odd quid for a scan. Is it a lot less nowadays? I haven't had it negative scanned in years, you know.
Of I get 16 to a roll of medium format with this camera, and it's about 15 quid.
Yeah.
Plus the scanning, 7 quid, say, so it's not too bad.
No, really good.
Also, obviously, you don't want to waste any of those shots. They're precious.
It's a different kind of speed.
It really is, yeah.
Yeah. Karl, absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much. Some amazing images. Thanks for choosing your 8 images. So I'm just going to pop in the chat panel. They've got a few questions coming through as well. All right, but in the chat panel, I'll just put the link to your website. From there, you can obviously go to Facebook and to Insta as well with it. Where would they go for the workshops? Clicking onto the workshops here, yes?
Yeah, and at the end, there was a discount code somewhere on, is it in other on the end there? But these are the upcoming workshops, actually, yes. So if you scroll
Let's
down
do
again.
the workshops first.
So, yes, just go back. Oh, I can't.
Back up. Sorry.
Just these images. So we've got Winter Solitude, Dungeness, and Saltwick Bay. The Spurn Point this weekend is sold out, but the 3 below that, I have availability on all of those.
Brilliant. And the discount code you said?
If you go to the far end, I can't actually see it because I can't move my panel. Oh, there we go. Just a sec. So you're under more and discount codes.
There we go.
There we go. So there's a
Excellent.
link. Well, yeah.
Brilliant. I'll just send you a quick, everybody a quick chat panel on that one as well with it.
Yeah, and if anybody has any questions about the papers or about the discount codes or workshops, just send me a message. Perhaps
we can do another one dedicated to printing in the dark months with you. It's always busy for us in the dark months.
Yes, please. Yeah, I'd love to. It'd be great to come back. Yeah.
Great and things really. Perhaps we can get you to do some behind the scenes, just a little video on your iPhone, and we can add that in as well, kind of thing with it, whatever it is. Karl, look, before we forget, absolutely brilliant. Couple of more questions going through. Sorry for overrunning, guys and girls, but again, really worth it. Thanks, Karl. Absolutely brilliant images. A couple of quickies, if that's okay. You go to work in aperture and exposure.
I don't have one. It depends on the scene. For general landscape use, F11.
Meter or in-camera metering?
In-camera metering for digital, because I don't think you can really fault it. But even with my Bronica, the in-camera metering is really good, but I do also carry a separate light meter.
Do you process in 16-bit?
Yes.
Yep. At what stage do you convert to 8-bit?
When I decide to share something to social media or something, yeah.
Okay. Which was the tripod again, please, that you recommended?
But my main tripod is a Benro Mark III.
Okay. And your go-to black and white paper again, please.
That was from Hahnemühle's Natural line, and it's the Agave.
Brilliant. And loads of thank yous. Thank you, Karl. Absolutely brilliant, mate.
Brilliant questions, and thank you, Mark.
Oh, I get the ringside seat. I just sit here and talk the questions through and things really. Boys and girls, thank you so much for being with us. If it's your very first time, I hope you'll join us again. Karl, we've got to grab you back. We've got to do a printing night because we haven't done one of those in a long time, but we'll see you all soon. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, see you in a few weeks' time. Take care now. Merry Christmas, everybody.
Merry Christmas.
It's November, I know, but I just felt I had to say it.